I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf. I'm the founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute. We are broadcasting live from West Palm Beach at the International Leadership Association Conference. And our guest is Brad Jackson. Brad is the Director of Policy Innovation Hub and Professor of Social Innovation within the Griffith Business School at Griffith University. Today, we're going to talk about Brad's most recent book, Revitalizing Leadership, Putting Theory and Practice into Context. So, Brad, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll jump into the book.
I've spent the first 18 years of my life in England, the next 18 in Canada, another 18 in New Zealand. The whole focus on social innovation, to me, answers a very important question, which is leadership for what? So I've spent a lot of my career, working in leadership teaching, leadership theory, leadership practice and development. But I was starting to get uneasy about, well, what's that for? Because too much of it was about if you get the techniques right, the behaviors, the skills, etc., but not enough about, well, why? So I got very focused on this role of purpose in leadership. The book that we'll be talking about is called Revitalizing Leadership, and I co-authored it with four of my colleagues, three other colleagues in New Zealand, Susie Wilson, Stephen Cummings, and Sarah Proctor-Thompson. And essentially the book emerged from our collective concern about the state of leadership research and leadership thinking, and how that was becoming quite detached from the quite remarkably bad and some of the remarkably good things that are happening in the world through, the digitization, through the challenges to democracy, post-truth world, etc., environmental degradation, all of the usual list of wicked problems that you've alluded to. But given what's going on and given the recognition that people have around leadership, when you look at, quote, the state of leadership thinking and theory, it's almost as if that hasn't happened. So everything's sort of rolling along, evolving, using generic theories of transformational leadership or authentic leadership, servant leadership. But there's been no recognition about, actually, the world is a very different and much more dangerous place than it was. Why do we pretend in our leadership thinking that that's not happening? So I guess our argument, so that was the call for revitalizing. In fact, we want to make it, as a play on being vital, as opposed to being kind of politely, pleasant, but not and constructive.
Yeah, not sustainable, not thriving.
That's right. And so, the revitalization was a focus on, I feel like, making it vital and making it come to life, making it real. Because so much of the focus has been around developing sort of abstract ideas and tools and techniques of models that you can apply pretty well anywhere. And if you get the techniques right, then you get success, you get leadership success. And what we're arguing is that's a problem. In actual fact, what we need to do is to bring context into the equation. So in other words, most of the effort has been about, we want to develop theories that are context-less, that are generic, that are universal. And the very act of doing that sows the seeds of the problems. In fact, it contributes to or inhibits our ability to tackle the wicked problems. Everyone's looking for the big universal solution. But what we're arguing is you've got to begin and start with where you're at, when you're at. And that's critical to the leadership that you need to develop.
And I would say that, and this is about you, not me, but my work also very much encompasses, we call it situational analysis. I can't prescribe a set of leadership behaviors that is universal. We can say in theory, in the book, this is what we think is most effective. But what you're doing in New Zealand in technology is going to be different than what the U.S. Army's doing. Less like.
Yeah, but even within New Zealand, and this is the issue, because I think, whenever I come to the States, I love coming here, and the ILA is, I've been part of this because I sort of realized that we got to work on a global basis. But there's still this idea that there is, international, and then there's presumably national. I haven't quite understood what US thinking is, but there's this sort of, you're international, so it's different there. But the truth be told, I mean, just, I went from West Palm Beach to Palm Beach. If you go across the bridge, it's a completely different world.
I did that last night.
I'm like, wow. So when people talk about, that's in the US, and of course it's different in New Zealand, etc. Look, within New Zealand, so what we're arguing is a much more finer focus about particular places and starting there. And so you mentioned, leadership thinking, and then you apply it, and then situation. We're saying that thinking needs to emerge from the place. It needs to emerge
based on the place. Okay.
Yeah. Part of it is, you might say bottom up versus top down, but I don't think it's more about actually drawing on what are the kind of resources and what's the thinking there, what's distinctive about this particular place that becomes a critical driver in the research, not we better take that into account at the end.
So say more about how that process works.
Yeah. Well, I think it's basically, if you think about, so just in terms of what we're arguing within organisations. So if you like, we've striven hard to become a separate field, leadership versus entrepreneurship versus operations research versus strategy. And we've sort of pulled out and said, there is this distinctive thinking, behaviours, skill sets of leadership. There's ours, and you need to learn these in the way you need to learn these. So, classic MBA, how that works.
Okay, yeah.
What we're saying is by pulling out the leadership, we've lost something really vital.
Got it. Okay.
So in the book, we basically present chapters about if we were to bring leadership into entrepreneurship, into HR, into governance, into it's just a strategy or whatever. It's actually saying you can't pull it out. As soon as you pull it out, you lose something quite vital. And so what we've suggested just within organisations, that actually there are these processes. And, my particular field that I'm most passionate about is about governance.
Okay.
About, I learned a lot from governance being on their higher league board. Some great minds that, you can imagine you've got 20 leadership experts. But what strikes me is when you read the governance, it's like leadership's silent there. Leadership's done somewhere else, I mean, it's and management's done somewhere else. So you have people who do governance, people who do leadership, people who do management, And and it's this idea that's the key focus and task. But in actual fact, the way in which boards work together, the chair relationship, the CEO, but also the whole, how are they creating leadership in governance? But, and how conscious are they of that? And more particularly, the very direct, but more powerfully, the indirect influences, the way they create leadership has an enormous influence on what happens in the rest of the organisation. So what I'm trying to say is, instead of people saying, we do governance, the senior team does leadership, and then the middle managers do management, and the rest just show up. We're actually saying, you've got to have leadership in governance, leadership in supervision, leadership in, there's these general organisational processes. So that's an example of sort of contextualising leadership thinking.
So as you're talking about that, what comes to mind is I joined a board of a university as they were in receivership.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a fascinating and painful process, but we were able to actually have them acquired. So that was the good news. But I joined the committee that was helping do strategic planning and change the bylaws, change how we functioned or how we were governed. And it was very clear that the old way of decision-making and being led came from the board. They selected CEOs who led in a certain way. That needed to change, but it had to come from the board also. Yep. The CEO too, but the board is directing the CEO's behavior in many cases.
Also executive team and the rest of the organisation. Right. I think they're unaware of the influence, what they're paying attention to, how it's picked up by the rest of the organisation. They get it. So, from that perspective, because the role of the CEO appointment and retention and, don't get me wrong, it's central. So it's actually saying the leadership work doesn't begin and end there.
In receivership, the board was more heavily involved. So this isn't a normal operation, but we had to get reporting focus on what was happening inside the organization, all of that, and where we did and where we didn't focus. And the tone we set on economics versus other indicators really was probably what got them to receivership, frankly. Leadership is happening in in the entire organization, including bottom up from their employees.
And I think that's probably our other focus and I'm sure you've picked up this on other interviews, this focus on leadership, not leaders. And that's a key task. But the New Zealand Leadership Institute several years ago, we got, I think, about 30 of the top chairs and CEOs of organisations across 30 sectors.
Okay.
And we got them to reflect on we just basically had several word cards. We put this in front of these, very eminent executives and said, talk to me about governance. Talk to me about leadership. What was fascinating was we collected all of the data about how they were looking, and then we realized, and they were becoming quite conscious of it. We fed the data back there. They basically said, look, we are unconsciously, there are unintended consequences of the way we are governing that actually thwarts leadership, doesn't promote. Because they have this sort of dominant sort of policing, due diligence, checks and balances mentality. It was quite fascinating to see that actually, because they hadn't been conscious of the leadership impact and their leadership together, that had thwarted their ability to actually promote leadership. So what they were getting was completely opposite to what they were looking for, but they weren't planning to do that. But it was just the way that they felt, okay, when you do governance, you have to behave this way. There are these rituals, there are these, that we always did it this way and we always do it that way. That actually was thwarting the leadership they were looking for. So there's an example of the fact that they were thinking about governance, not necessarily thinking about leadership, instead of saying, where's our leadership in governance there?
It's the intersection.
Exactly. So, it's like, now we'll do the leadership. Okay, now we'll do the governance now. No, actually, they work simultaneously, but they're there to achieve different things. And just being conscious about it, say, hold it. When was the last time we had some conflict? When was the last time we had some tension? When was the last time we, had some edge here? So I was saying, why are we spending so much time talking about this? We're wasting our time, versus going through the emotions of the ritual, So that's what we're trying to say is, whereas if you had the kind of leadership thinking, okay, that happens here, let's do some leadership work. If it's not contextualized in the other work that has to be done in the organization, it's all for naught.
Yeah, again, I think of my background as consulting, and when we would go into companies, we would fix quotes, systems. And so we would swap out a computer system. But we ignored, this was 20 years ago, so not current. But
I'm sure it's current practice still, actually, Maureen.
But we didn't always attend to the culture, or we would say employees need to behave this new way, but we don't change the performance management system. The culture is an organization where people act separately and they compete among business units. And then we put in a computer system that makes everything transparent. Well, they don't want, that's not what the former culture promoted. And so by being unconscious of what we're doing, so back to your point of we function in these little, this is my objective, and I'm going straight at that objective, but without looking at the unconscious ripples through the entire organization, I create damage.
Well, in a way, you're saying this is an IT system problem, which will eventually enable us to do a bunch of other things. Instead of saying this is a leadership opportunity risk. The way in which we go about doing this is actually, this is the leadership development. Even though it's an IT system, it feels, it's not. So this is, I think it's thinking we do the leadership development when we focus on leadership, instead of saying in the IT work, that's how we go about doing it as leadership work. And it's not just about, let's do some change management, sprinkle that in, get the system, a bit of straight change management. It's actually saying how you go about determining this as a priority, how you go about, basically engaging, involving, refining, etc. That's the leadership opportunity in the most mundane things. So people tend to think of leadership as a sort of remarkable visionary moment, a turnaround, bankruptcy or whatever. But it's actually in the details, the mundane things. You can do it in a leaderful way or non-leaderful way. And so that's what I'm saying, by getting the leadership thinking, and it's interesting because, our colleagues in business schools, you get those are kind of, okay, they're the leadership guy, they're the hopeless romantics, and then the rest of us are
doing the work.
Yeah, doing the real work, strategy, finance, accounting, and real stuff, But that's just so it's in that. So, I mean, we did, we started to do that at University of Auckland. We started to say, look, let's get people who are in supply chain management, they've got something in common, and then let's develop our leadership within that. People engage in leadership development, 2-3 days, they talk about leadership, they get involved, etc. And they return. But actually, what we were finding was if you say, look, there are supply chain issues. So in fact, what we would do is approach organisations that are sufficiently different from each other that they could look. And so well, there are people who have lead supply chain challenges, and some of those are operational, technical, financial, whatever. But there's a leadership element. So how, when they are tackling supply chain, how do we surface the leadership processes there in consultation with the technical, with the... And so it was actually much more effective to be able to say, and also given you're dealing with supply chain people with it, they've got a reasonably shared context, that it's not, the leadership just emerges as part of the other considerations as opposed to saying, this is the leadership moment, right? Because there is this sort of sense that that's the soft stuff, the hard stuff. But let's do some soft stuff and we'll get back to the hard stuff. It's the soft and hard. I mean, that's the thing that I think we as leadership, who are in leadership development, like, mentioned consulting, etc., is to sort of get over being precious about the leadership being so important, and this is the primary thing, etc. To actually say, get in there, start to look at organisational challenges or whatever, and just recognise these as one of a whole bunch of things that actually need to be addressed. And it was not, if you like, put it on a pedestal, isolate it. So, I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is to say, get in there. I found, we're teaching in cases, really complex technical cases that, people would say, what's that got to do with leadership? Well, here's a leadership case study. I think it's that's what we're trying to do, is sort of make it ordinary, well, not ordinary, but just tied up with a whole bunch
interconnected with.
And just part of the whole things you've got to think about in this, as opposed to this is leadership business and then the rest is other business.
In fact, in our writing, I talk about the idea that when we're implementing change, as a leader, I'm not changing those people out there. I have to change myself. And it seems like that's one of the big failings, is people who have titles of whatever above are less aware that they personally need to change, because we haven't talked about it that way. Once I'm a CEO or whatever, I've made it. And this is a generalization, and certainly I realize lots of humans are different. But it seems like often at a certain level, the change is now supposed to happen with them, not us.
So, I understand you've been, talking with Pete Griffith has been very helpful, and, he's been honoured here at the ILA conference, and I have the pleasure or the privilege of thanking him on behalf of all his colleagues. But, the thing he focuses on is, focus on leadership, not leaders. That's the critical thing. And we mentioned the Revitalizing leadership book, but the most recent book I've been involved with, my colleague Ken Perry, is called A Very Short, Fairly Interesting, Quite Cheap Book About Studying Leadership. And it's the third edition. It's a test that's used throughout the world. But what we developed from Keith is six lenses of leadership, and the first two are, person and position. So they focus on, they're the ones that the way most people tend to think about leadership. It's about someone who's in an authority role, and it's all about their personality, you fix their personality, etc. Go down a little bit, and you can think of it as an iceberg and be like, you've got this focus on performance and process. So in other words, they're not unimportant, who's at the top and what's their personality. Not unimportant, but not by no means crucial. But then the other lens is bringing to, how leadership is being done. And it's the leadership being done. It's not,
that's the other.
I use the word creative, but people have trouble with it. But I mean, it's trying to emphasize that this is a living, breathing thing that a whole bunch of people create, not just the leader. And the other is about the performance, how, what's been achieved by the leadership.
How's it measured? How's it?
That's right.
All that stuff.
Actually, the culture tends to fall under that, because it's not, performance is not so much just about, do you hit the numbers, but are you doing it right? Are you doing it in a legitimate way?
In a way that is consistent with our values and that stuff.
That's it, or inconsistent sometimes. So it's the performance is not just about, the getting hit and up, doing right. It's actually making sure you're doing it in a way that people see as acceptable as, how you do it. So they're the four, but just getting down to the ones that really matter as far as I'm concerned, the ones that don't tend to get much attention. I mean, you'll see we've got 4 Ps. There's 2 Ps in it we've added to Keith's. And these are very simple. One's around purpose and one's around place. So in other words, why are we creating leadership? Like I talked to you earlier around that leadership for what issue. Very closely related to where leadership is being created, and that's sort of where and when. So
physical place and time in history.
Yeah. Because I'd say generally, big generalization, of course, that leadership theorists have tried to, get out the peculiarities of time and place. So if you think about it, I mean, business schools have focused on trying to make things faster, quicker, where space is, so time and space they're the enemy. We'll do everything we can. To the point where we create an international language of management and leadership and governance around the world. And that's one of the things the business schools have done, and leadership professors have contributed to. When in fact, if you really are serious about leadership, you need to be much more conscious about where people are, when they are. And that, because often, you mentioned the change management is, there are these steps, the processes, etc., which are basically universal. I mean, the consulting firms change the logo of the place on the slides, but basically it's the same show. Whereas, as you well know, I mean, an organisation, where it is, it matters. It's important to people that, that's where people say art resistance or whatever. But actually, instead of it being a constraint, it's a terrific resource for leadership.
I was going to say that we're working with human beings who are supporting families who want to do meaningful work, who want to contribute in the world, and helping them, enabling them to do that. I mean, that's a big part of what leadership should be doing.
Yep. But what I'm going to say is we have generally suppressed this idea of place because, places that are, and really all places is the meaning ascribed to space.
Right.
And the time, what is it about being at Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, Brisbane or whatever. And even within that, in neighbourhoods and, different parts of organisations on floors.
It's funny how it's different even in departments.
Yeah. People, and it's so, but that's foolish. That's not, that doesn't mean that needs to be eliminated because it's not efficient, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it's fundamentally human to attach meaning to where you are.
It's what keeps us safe, right? I mean, that's how our brains function. We attach meaning to the random stuff.
Yeah. And ironically, the marketers get that because they go, oh, we've got it to sell. We need to persuade these people that this is a distinctive place that is meaningful to them. So,
and valuable.
Yeah. I mean,
this is where we attach value, therefore it costs more.
Yeah, so city place across the way. I mean, it's you walk in, it's like a Disney set, but they're trying to create something that people can, feel, it can be more human here than it can, the outward world where I went 2 days ago. It's completely placeless, and that's the whole point. It's just boxes, and you go and you walk between the boxes. It's not hard to walk between them, by the way. But so there is something. So I'm saying, in a way, people are realizing that there is something distinctive that is meaningful, and they tap into that perhaps in the marketing. You're unique. You're in a unique context. But actually, in leadership, that is where people are. And in terms of my thinking for this, I'm a geographer originally. Sorry, there's I'm a geographer originally. That's what I was trained in, so it's all about space. About place. But working in New Zealand, we refer to as Aotearoa, that's the New Zealand name. I worked with Morrow, the indigenous, the first people. And they made really changed my thinking in a very serious way about 2 things. They basically said there's no difference between leadership and governance. That one of the same thing. So hence the leadership and governance idea. And the other said is, don't forget, it's about land.
It's about land.
Like
Same about the land, not our land.
The land.
Because they don't own, right?
Well, but yeah, to do it, this, I mean, which was taken from them, etc.
Okay, I was thinking they don't have. Do they now own property?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, they do.
Yeah. I mean, they're big land claims, etc., which the country's working through. But it's beyond the legal entity. And I'm not saying it's not important. It's actually who you are is where you're from. So your connection to land. So they have, when you go to the Morelli, the meeting room, you're brought on for the porphyry, they ask you to give a mihi, which you answer several questions, and two of them are really very interesting. The first is, what is your mountain?
What is your mountain?
Yep. And what is your river?
Oh, interesting.
So, Maureen, what's your mountain and what's your river?
And so I was born in Munich, Germany.
Yep.
I didn't live there when I grew up, so I don't know what I would say. And I would say the Olentangy River in Ohio.
Great.
And we don't have mountains.
Well, you got hills. So no.
I live in a ravine, the Walhalla Ravine.
There you go.
And that does define my life because I walk every day in the ravine. Being outside in the natural world is foundational to how I live my life.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you've done it much better than most people, including me, because I had to really think about that, like where is that? And it's interesting when I, ask that question, I give in talks about leadership in place. I get people to email me about a month later and say, I figured it out, this is it, so that was a powerful question for me because it's about, there's something timeless, something fundamental about land, about where you are on the earth. And it's not just, quote, an environmental issue. That gives you the basis to start to develop an environmental consciousness. But it gives you the basis to develop a whole bunch of consciousness as well. So in a way, what I see is a place where, if you look at leadership theory, it's a leadership thinker that's just pretty well placeless. I mean, although, Keith, who you spoke to, has done a super job of reminding us about history.
Okay.
His historic perspectives are very rich to say, look, there's really nothing new. Got to learn from that. And we've got to go beyond the way we generally interpret the past. If we want to understand leadership, you've got to be able to ask those awkward questions about conventional wisdom. So, in a way, the way I describe leadership in place is like it's a relationship. Place influences leadership. And so where you're from, so leadership from place. And, working with place to be able to develop a common purpose, a common identity, and a common direction is really, it's an important basis for that leading through place. So it's actually saying we need to tackle this issue, but to get people together, we need to actually say, what do they see as the common issues and challenges around the one thing they do share, and that's place. It's beyond the CEO, beyond the position, beyond the personalities, beyond the process, beyond the performance. Fundamentally, we'll be here now and gone tomorrow, or gone whenever. But this place is going on.
So the sense of 7 generations and how do I defining thriving as not just economic, also economic, but the money helps us sustain the ecosystem.
Yep. Yeah, socially, culturally, and
ecologically.
Yeah.
If I kill off species that happen to be part of the food chain and part of the health of the physical earth, then without attending to that system, damaging the system causes damage to us.
Yeah.
We don't attend to that as often.
No, I think we think, okay, that's environmental leadership, and then there's business leadership, and then there's... But actually, it's what I'm trying to do is to mainstream it, to say, look, if you're interested in creating leadership, how much are you thinking about your place? How much are you thinking about your purpose? In addition to how much you're thinking about personality and position and performance and process,
Beautiful.
It's what I'm trying to say. It's not about, you're an environmentalist, whatever. It's actually saying, wherever you are, you've got a resource there and a constraint, because where you are is a constraint for you. Now you've got to be conscious of that. But as you know, the key task of a leadership is to define the situation. Can they define the situation in a compelling way that others respond to and say, yeah, I get it. I'm in there, or the situation is place.
Beautiful. On that note, we're going to take a break. So let me summarize, though. Attending to the situation, strongly emphasizing place, is foundational to how we lead.
Yeah. I'd say it was you can use it as the sort of basis from which to lead, not I'll do all this leadership and then there's a place in which I'm going to do it. Actually, so you begin and start with where you are. The phrase, I think the Oasis had the be here now. That's that phrase, that's, that might be a way of encapsulating it.
I like that. What are you thinking, or what are your observations about leadership based on what you're seeing right now?
Yeah.
And state of leadership.
Yeah. No, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I was on the ILA board for about 6 years. I got more involved in public policy and government, so I had to go to other conferences. And so I'm really enjoying coming back. I mean, to be honest, the nicest people I've met, any academic or whatever, they're all in leadership studies. I mean, leadership development or whatever. So I feel I'm at home. Very constructive people, very engaging, very inclusive. Strong spirit, strong sense of collective purpose. Because that, one of the things I'm concerned about is I go to the sessions, it's pretty well very similar discussions that we had 3, 5, 7, 9 years ago. So there's, and yet the world's changed quite radically. And I think part of that is that quote academic training. I mean, it was part of the emerging scholars session last night, and I told the student I talked to, a PhD student, was from India, and she's here studying, and a PhD, she had a postdoc, she had everything you expect to see in a PhD, all the components, etc. But I said, well, tell me about who you are, or what you want to do, tell me about the experience, and she felt that she was sort of, because of the training, she was having to miss a lot of really important philosophical issues because it's just instrumental, identify this bit, and we do the equations. And so, in a way, she was trapped by the same issues. She was looking to revitalize leadership. She wanted to talk about, issues around place, around purpose, and the other, but the training suggests that you have to, and so, using various models as well. And so it's interesting to see. I love the spirit, I love the dedication, I love the care, but I worry about the extent to of real intellectual curiosity. What are we doing to harness that and to sort of really, say what's going on out there, what are we doing? So incredibly well intentioned, incredibly smart people, incredibly, daring people. And that gives me a lot of heart. But then I think, wow, to what extent are we really making a difference?
I looked at the person who won the award for, I think it was doctoral dissertation.
Yes.
And it sounded like she was really evaluating the current state of leadership as well. Especially gender dynamics, and saying, we need to change this. Yeah.
I met her for the first time this morning too. In fact, she works with a very good colleague of mine, Eric, who I've written with. In a way, you feel like the way we talk about leadership and the kind of obsession we have about it, and the sort of romanticism about it, the sense of this, this heroic ideas about it actually holding up our ability to really make the change that we need. I think that's what she's sort of saying, I need to find the leader in me, and it's all about the leader in me versus, look, get over yourself. It's about creating leadership. It's about how do we get people, to actually tackle these problems, creating a common sense of identity, purpose, and direction. That's what leadership is. So moving the discourse from saying, I need to be a really good leader, I need to be seen to be a good leader, that's really important. And so identity-based. To actually saying, look, what's really important is leadership. And that's how we're going to keep this developed. And a number of others as well. Susie Wilson, who was the co-author with me here, won the same prize 4 years ago. With a very strong historic critique of the underpinnings of leadership. Heavily individualized, heavily instrumental, heavily psychological in the, And so, so it's, it's great to see this similar line of argument. I mentioned Nicole Susan, and I was using her work as well. So, it is this feeling that, we're being trapped because of the way we think about leadership. And this is why this lens approach is good, because, okay, you get the leader in there and, all this sort of stuff, but you get followers, you get following. I mean, the way Ken and I define leadership in the very short book is about it's leading and following. Good. And it's through communication. That's the only way it happens. It doesn't happen any other way. But the critical thing is, so the following and leading is something we got over. The previous edition was leader and follow. We got over that. We're now leading and following because of this conversation. You're leading, I'm following, that we lead and follow, etc. But the critical thing is, what's it for? Really,
and that's back to purpose.
Yeah. Purpose, identity and direction. Yeah. Okay. So that's all it is. It's not no magic, and it can either be done for bad or for good.
When I do leadership workshops, the first thing we start with, if they go through a full process, is understanding your own purpose. If I don't know who I am and what I'm about, it is harder for me to lead as a truly effective leader. If I'm not capturing that part of who I am, that is the leader.
Yeah, well, it's done. Yeah. That's important, but probably even more important as your role as a leader is to try to gain a collective sense of who are we, what do we stand for, and where are we going.
And in fact, so we do a series of reflection questions that are in the categories of who am I, what do I believe, who am I and what do I do, who are we and what do we stand for, and then who are we and what do we do, and creating alignment within all of those. So knowing myself and knowing us. And if I'm not aligned with the organization, it creates ethical questions about how do I lead and what am I doing here?
Yeah, no, I think that's a powerful process. Just to provoke, because that's my job. That's why I'm in Australia, not here. But in fact, my experience with the Aboriginal people of Australia has reinforced for Maori is that actually all that matters is who we are. You just start with who we are, and then maybe from that, the I question. So we is the most important question, and we and land are completely inseparable. Completely. If you've seen the linguistic groups, there's something like over 600 linguistic groups in Australia amongst the Aboriginal people. They're all bound by place. They're all by land. So that place actually, you talked about the ravine or the, it's dying, so it's there. So the language, we talk about leadership being a communicative process. The language is central. It's grounded in the land. The language has evolved because of the particular geographic challenge that they had,
that makes sense.
So in a way, I fully get I need to figure out who I am, then we need to figure out who we are. I'm questioning them. I'm saying, why? Why is that important?
Well, in a culture, specifically the U.S., where there is a lot of individualism, as a leader, knowing who I am allows me to come to the organization with a greater sense of grounding, rather than I am the collection of the things everyone told me I am without giving any reflection to it.
But to what extent, when people are working, and this is what I think Nicole's argument is, by the way, is when people say, oh, I've worked out who I am, is that conditioned by the expectations that are placed on them to be who they need to be?
I'm sure it is. I would like to say our process invites them to consider that. But the reality is that level of reflection takes a great deal of time and effort. And not everyone is interested or able, given their life conditions, to even take the time to reflect. In a deep way.
And let's be frank, dominant thinking about leadership has been Anglo-Saxon. Very individually focused. If your leader's not delivering, get someone else. Very passive aggressive in terms of its approach. Whereas, Hispanic communities and the other is becoming,
very collective.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting going to Miami versus going to West Palm Beach. I mean, it's like, they're in the same, it's a completely different experience, So in New Zealand, we become increasingly have the sort of, the family people and in a period of about 20 years, we've become one of the most diverse countries on the planet. Okay. And what's interesting from my perspective, because I was at one point the first professor of leadership I was the only one for a little while, and there's thankfully quite a few others now, but was to see that as a tremendous resource for different approaches and philosophies of leadership. Definitely you could actually draw on to say, in order to tackle these problems, there are other ways that we can create leadership that we need to learn from, not just this sort of Anglo-Saxon-based powerful leader who goes in and makes the change, all this kind of stuff. So, and I think that, so it's actually thinking about the extent to which that's sort of a powerful resource to draw on, to say, actually we've got to, these are tough, wicked problems. Just the way we've gone about tackling them, and it's not working.
No, in fact, we created a competency model that builds on some research by Suzanne Cook-Goritter from Harvard, looking at developmental maturity, and innately collaborative is one of the characteristics, and that means collaborating with people who are different than me, not finding my clones around the world and collaborating with them. But we don't solve wicked problems by insulating. We solve them by looking outside, evaluating both the problem, the conditions that created them, and ourselves. How am I contributing to the perpetuation of the problem just by my thinking and behavior?
Yeah.
So I think, again, I need to know who I am and how I'm contributing so that I can separate myself out and stop being part of it.
Yeah, and let me tell you, one of the things you wouldn't notice from 9 years ago or 10 or 20 years ago, because the first conference was 20 years ago, 20th anniversary, is the very true diversity. I mean, people from all over the world. I mean, it's remarkable. And from, gender, is a very strong feminine that appeal to this culture, which is terrific. Also from, the various ethnic. And so it looks and feels and sort of. My only worry is that no doubt about it. It's terrific to see this diversity, but to what extent have we really harnessed that diversity of thinking? So to what extent has the agenda really changed as a result? Not so much the agenda. Well, agenda is important, but how we tackle the problems that we've got, and that's what I'd say. When you talked earlier about. My concerns, I don't feel this has really changed in the way it could do and should do. And that's something, as a board, we were always working on. We are an international leadership association. What does that mean in terms of how we need to be as an association? How do we need to run the conferences, and how do we... So, it's something I'm just a little still not quite, settled with.
So are you going to rejoin the board to impact that?
Well, I've been invited, but they've got some exceptionally fine people there, and I'll do what I can from my vantage point in Australia now, and do what I can. I mean, I held the first regional conference in Oceania in New Zealand, but Australia, Pacific Islanders, and I think that's been really important for the ILA, is being able to hold these conferences in South Africa and Liverpool and in Europe too. So I think that's another way of saying we've got something, using geography there as the basis for a gathering of people. What do you got in common? And I'm a great passionate believer in Oceania. I love that part of the world. I think it's, there's some very rich leadership and governance philosophies there that we want to share with the rest of the world. So,
Maybe I need to come to your next conference. So in 1 minute, what's next for you?
Yeah, well, my focus, I'm directing the Policy Innovation Hub, and, we work on policy challenges, that the state governments are focused on NGOs, the Commonwealth Government, etc. And what I'm hoping to be able to do is to build, a stronger sort of leadership mindset to policy, because it's, it's quite analytical But we want it to be more innovative, which actually says how you go about defining policy problems and how you go about implementing them should be as important as, quote, the policy itself. So our key focus is around collaborative governance, how government working with community, working with Indigenous groups, working with business. But how do you get the leadership that enables that governance? So in other words, and how do you get the governance that sustains the leadership?
I see that.
So to me, what's central there is place. So in other words, you define the place and you basically make that central to tackling the problems. The problems get defined by the place. But what's up in mind? What's uppermost for this place? The problem definition should come from the place, but that's going to require some pretty canny leadership that's beyond NGO, beyond business, beyond government, beyond Indigenous. So the cross-sectoral challenge around places, that's the big challenge. And so that's what's next. But I want to thank you for giving me the chance to talk with you. I've learned a lot from there, and I really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much.
This episode is brought to you by the Innovative Leadership Institute, working with companies that recognize the need to upskill their leaders and transform their organizations. What worked yesterday won't work today, and what works today won't work tomorrow. We help executive teams prepare for accelerated uncertainty by creating the foresight needed to stay competitive, elevating leaders to succeed, and transforming organizations to become future-ready. If you'd like to discuss how we can help prepare your organization for tomorrow, please visit innovativeleadership.com and click Contact Us.